I now declare the Plano City Council preliminary open meeting is reconvened in open session, that all council members are present. Shelby Williams will be on Zoom. Our first item is item 1, preliminary agendas and consideration of actions resulting in an executive session. Well, we have none. Item 2 is Personnel Retirement Security Plan Committee.
Mayor and Council, I'd like to recommend that we make Karen Rhodes Whitley the chair of the Retirement Security Plan Committee and that we appoint Jenny Zellfelder for one of the employee positions on the committee.
I'll make that a motion.
I'll second the
motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve the personnel additions and the chair on item 2. All in favor, raise your hand. Motion passes 8-0. Item 3 will move to a future meeting. Item 4 is Emergency Management Department report. Carrie Little.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank y'all for having us come before y'all to give you a report about the activities of our department over the last about year and a half. We've been a little busy in our department, mainly dealing with COVID and the winter storm and the ongoing efforts. So I just wanted to give you a brief update about where we've been and what we're doing. I'm starting with our building. Most of y'all have been to our wonderful facility, and we do want to give you a thank you for letting us have such a beautiful facility. We have people come to us from all over to see what we've done in the EOC, our audio-visual update that we completed a couple of years ago. And it's just a fantastic facility. I can't say enough good things about it. So a brief background about what we do in emergency management. Our job is to coordinate with all of our partners so that as we respond to disaster, we have a clear outline of who's responsible for what and what resources they bring to the table. So that includes our city departments, our school districts, our hospitals, public health, and then state, federal agencies, and other local entities that surround us. Wanted to talk a little bit about our departmental organization. This budget year, we've added an additional manager position in our department. And so one of our senior emergency management specialists was promoted up, and that's Larry Hauk. But this team, this small but mighty team, has worked really hard over the last couple of years to help respond to COVID and to the ice storms and to all of the challenges that we have faced. We do have 2 vacant positions in our office right now. We are interviewing for those tomorrow and Wednesday, so we hope to have those filled by the end of the month. So some recent departmental activities. COVID-19 has been a big challenge for our office. We had the initial response. We then went into testing, and that was our public safety, primarily our fire department, working to help administer tests in some of our nursing homes during the start of the pandemic. We had to deal with hurricane sheltering, which was done differently in a pandemic. Typically, we do hurricane sheltering in a mass care congregate situation. When we had Hurricane Laura come to Texas, FEMA decided to put people into hotels, and that prompted a lot of challenges, not necessarily for us here in Plano, but for the region. And so our offices worked to support those efforts across the region. We moved into vaccine, and vaccine started initially with vaccine of our public safety employees and our elderly population before it expanded into vaccine for everyone. We've worked very hard on supply procurement, and that's taking requests from our healthcare agencies, our city departments, and some of our other partners in ensuring that they had adequate supplies to respond to the pandemic. Our office touches all of those requests as they come in to the state system. They are routed through our office, so we were dealing with quite a lot of requests initially. Now that we've seen another wave, we are again dealing with those types of requests. So we have ongoing support to our city department and to our hospitals, and then FEMA reimbursement. We have applied for and received about $900,000 worth of FEMA funds, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on in the presentation. Our February winter storm, we saw an EOC activation. During that EOC activation, we dealt with supply distribution and then all of the cascading effects of that severe weather here in the area. We've applied for and received about $225,000 in federal reimbursement from that storm. We, as a department, have worked on a strategic plan for our office. We have not previously had a strategic plan in place, and so after COVID and winter storm, as we are reorganizing, which is our next bullet, we're looking at things strategically and how we can best serve the citizens using the lessons learned. Just a heads up to know that we have a comprehensive emergency management plan update that is scheduled for this year. That does require council approval, so look for that later in the year. We also have a hazard mitigation action plan update. Both of these are legislatively required, and they also require council approval. So just know that I will be coming back to you, or you might see that on a future agenda to understand what those plans entail. Continuing, we've been working with our police and fire and school district to try to develop some active shooter exercises for all of our personnel in the spring. Our office administers our Homeland Security grant programs. That includes our state Homeland Security grant program and our Urban Area Security Initiative grant. Over the last 15 years, that's brought in a little over $5 million to the city for police, fire, emergency management, and public safety communication, and PSC for our dispatch office. We also participated in a pilot program with the Council of Governments, and that was another grant administered through our office for a Public Works Emergency Response Team trailer. It's a trailer that's here in Plano. It's full of different types of traffic barricades and signage. So we can use that if we have something here, but it's also a regional asset that we can share. As I mentioned, we're hiring for our vacant positions. We are looking at community outreach. So our CERT program has been on hold since the start of the pandemic, and we are looking to have that program start up again. We also had a very popular emergency preparedness merit badge program for the Boy Scouts, and we are working to get that program up and running again. Our social media footprint has expanded in the last 2 years. And then we are working with one of our staff members, specifically with our healthcare community. There are new requirements from the state and then also from Medicare, Medicaid for emergency preparedness for our healthcare facilities. And we are working with those facilities to ensure that their plans align with the plans and expectations that we have in the city of Plano. We have some upcoming departmental activities that I wanted to touch on. We are working to develop some facility emergency plans, what to do if something happens at our city facilities. That's both for our employees and for visitors. We are examining how we approach damage assessment. In the middle of the winter storm, the state rolled out a new damage assessment process, both for public infrastructure and for individuals to record the damages to their properties. So that has changed the way we do things, and we're having to reevaluate that damage assessment process. We're working with our city departments and then the state because they still haven't landed exactly on how that process is going to work moving forward. As I mentioned, we have the Boy Scout preparedness. We hope to have our one class each quarter for that Boy Scout preparedness. We are re-engaging our community emergency response team. We hope to hold a class in the fall. We realized during the pandemic and the winter storm that there was training that was necessary for the EOC and just for emergency management in general. And so we're working on a multi-year training and exercise plan that can help make sure that our employees here within the city understand their role. And then we are going to go forward with completion of after-action reviews for both the winter weather and then lessons learned from COVID, because it feels like we're going to be in COVID for a while longer still. So we certainly have lessons learned that we would like to capture. And then finally, we realized during the pandemic that our wonderful EOC AV project didn't include AV in some of our larger rooms, so we're doing a retrofit to include audiovisual capabilities for remote learning like Zoom or Skype in those larger rooms. I do not expect you to read this slide, but I wanted to put this up here because it shows some of the complexity of disaster recovery and activities that are occurring simultaneously often in pre-disaster, initial disaster, and then longer-term post-disaster activities. And these all are occurring in order for us to be able to receive our reimbursements. I wanted to note, too, and this is important, disasters are usually driven by dollars. And we had a disaster threshold update. The disaster thresholds are updated each year, but this past year we started using 2020 census data versus 2010 census data. So our multiplier for the state is 1.63 per capita. So that puts Texas at $47.5 million that we have to meet in damages to public property. That includes our municipal property, it includes roadways, school districts, county facilities, but that's $47 million across statewide before FEMA dollars would be opened up to provide us assistance. Previously, in 2020, that was $37 million. So our threshold has increased using our new population numbers. Comparatively, in Region 6, Arkansas is just under 5 million, Louisiana is at 7.6 million, Oklahoma is at 6.4, and New Mexico is at 3.4 million. Interestingly, we can see a disaster occur on the borders of some of these states, and in Texas we would not get the declaration, whereas in that other state they would. Now, in addition to that $47.5 million, that's what we have to meet as a state, each county has a per capita impact indicator, and the county per capita impact indicator is $4.10. So Collin County has to reach a threshold of $4.2 million as a county, not as a city, but as a county. And that $4.2 million has to roll into a total that's over that $47.5 million before those federal dollars become available for us to even apply for. Those are big changes, and in the county, our threshold went up about $1.2 million from what it had been previously. Continuing on our disaster thresholds, family assistance. So if we had individual assistance, if we had a disaster and we had individuals that were affected, FEMA has public assistance that is for our governmental agencies, and then individual assistance, which is for our families. This year, the max that a family could receive for housing is $37,900. There are other needs in addition to housing that FEMA will assist in. Those things can be like daycare or funeral expenses or loss of property, but those other needs also have a threshold of $37,900. That's the max that would be paid off. So it's important. We need help in spreading the message that insurance does equal preparedness. Even if a property is paid off, insurance equals preparedness, because if something bad happens to that property, most of the time, especially in the North Texas area, $37,900 is not going to make that home whole. So if you're insured or underinsured, I call it Franken recovery. It's kind of like Frankenstein, a bunch of different parts coming together. We would not want a house like I have projected up there that's 4 different building styles. But if you don't have the insurance for your home, after the federal assistance that you receive, you have to cobble together things like low-interest loans, nonprofit assistance, and faith-based assistance to recover, and that's very challenging. So that's a message that we like to spread whenever we go and give presentations, the importance of making sure that you have insurance for your property and for your valuables. A quick note, too, that while our family assistance thresholds are almost $38 million for housing and other needs, the average payout in Texas is a little under $8,000. So we just don't, it is rare to see all of that assistance received. That's all that we have. It's a very brief presentation. We've done a lot, but I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you very much, Carrie. You have any questions? Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, so you mentioned that you're still working through your after-action items and that you're going to be presenting us a new comprehensive emergency plan to approve. Do you have any thoughts on things that you've learned through COVID or the winter storm that you're going to be incorporating into that plan?
I think one of the biggest things that we'll be incorporating into that plan is communication, how we communicate internally with our employees and how we communicate externally to our residents. While we have outlines for that, we've learned some lessons on the best mechanism for that communication and how to leverage some platforms that we weren't necessarily leveraging just 5 years ago when we last brought this before you for update.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Carrie, for your and your department's great work. I know y'all have been especially busy the past couple of years, with COVID and Winter Storm Uri and everything else, so thank you for that. One thing I've been thinking about with the pandemic and the winter storm, those were things that I think few of us, maybe nobody saw coming, especially in the case of the pandemic. And how do we prepare for unanticipated events? We've got things, we know that a hurricane might hit and there might be, dislocated people who might come to Plano, or other types of disasters. A tornado might be foreseeable, but how do we prepare for that type of unique, hard to foresee event?
That is a great question. We are expanding our hazard mitigation plan, and that looks at all of the hazards that we face. The challenge is that we have limited dollars to put to a whole host of disasters. So that's where we come back to y'all for policy guidance on the best way to move forward and allocate those very discrete dollars in making sure that we're anticipating and preparing as best we can. And so it's really a balance between those kind of one-off things like the winter storm, at least we hope, knock on something, that it was one-off and we don't have a repeat of that. And then those things that we know occur year after year, like hail or severe weather or localized flooding.
Okay.
And Councilman, I would also ask that Carrie and I have been working for years
COVID's kind of interrupted things as far as doing a training for the entire city leadership group, including council in Emmitsburg, as part of the FEMA training. We did that about 15 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that as a city to do that. And that's one of the exercises we have planned to apply for once COVID's
Once they're offering
settled.
that exercise again, we've already told FEMA Region 6 we will be first on the list to apply for that.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Anybody else? Councilman Smith?
Hi, Kerry. Quick question. You touched on the COVID efforts and things earlier. What would you suggest is the best way to find out about our local COVID testing updates? Because I know I've had questions about it, and there's a concern about people now that a lot of illness things going around, but people can't really find access to to drive up or readily available testing. What's your suggestion on that?
So I don't have the website memorized, but there is a website that the state keeps updated that has both. They have a testing website, and then they also have a vaccine website where you can actually get on and search by zip code for what's closest to you, and I'm happy to provide that back.
Okay, good, because that is on everybody's mind right now. People think, as I understand, we don't operate the local testing centers, the tent centers that are all up. That's being operated independently.
That is correct, right? So we don't have a city or a county or a state-operated testing site here in Plano. But that state website does list all of the different, one is for testing and then one is for vaccines.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I thought I saw they were doing drive-through testing over at the event center. Is that correct?
At the event center, yes, they do have an entity that is set up over there to do testing. Right. So that is...
It's not a city run.
Right, it is not a city run.
Okay.
And there are several different sites that are doing testing all over Plano. And new ones that are coming up even now as we're going into this wave.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Lisa?
I wanted to let you know
I'm sorry.
presentation is not coming through on the Zoom. I can see it on Plano TV, but there's about a 30-second delay.
Lisa, it's not coming through. It's coming through on Plano TV, but not on Zoom.
Our next item is short-term rental update. Curtis Howard with Plano Police Department.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Mr. Israelson, Ms. Mims. I'm Curtis Howard with the Plano Police Department, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about short-term rentals. Just to kind of give you an overview, back in 2019, now recently retired Deputy City Manager Russian was tasked with dealing with some of the issues that we started seeing with short-term rentals at the time. One of the things that he did is he went out and got with various city entities, city departments, and got the stakeholders, and also we reached out to the community to kind of get input on short-term rentals, problems, that sort of thing. So we put stuff out on Nextdoor. We talked to homeowners associations, talked to the chamber, real estate folks here, and brought all that information together and started a committee. So the committee started meeting, and in order to deal with some of the things that we were hearing about, we came up with what we call the Coordinated Enforcement and Compliance Strategy to address some of those issues that we were seeing with some of these short-term rentals. Basically, that framework is the response, and as a police department, since we're normally going to get most of the calls initially on that sort of thing, we were dealing with the response there. Tracking, so we wanted to make sure that we tracked our data so we could see how effective we were being, and we changed the way we received data and tracked it in an effort to become, better prepared for that sort of thing. Analyze the data, and then also follow up. So kind of that after action to figure out what to do when we have these problems in order to mitigate the problems that we're seeing in the neighborhoods. This is my third presentation to council. The first presentation was in February of 2020. I also presented, I think it was in January of 2021. And so basically now we've come up with a way of providing this information to you. So some of the things that we do is, like I said, we track this better. We provide information to our command staff so they know if short-term, along with everything else that we're dealing with in the police department, so if we've got problem properties and neighborhoods, they're on task with that in an effort to try and again solve those problems. And then we also then that committee meets about quarterly to deal with these issues. So in dealing with that here within the city, we're also taking an approach and making sure we see what's going on legislatively. The 87th legislative session ended not too long ago, I guess one of the special sessions, but this past year they did have some proposed legislation that never made it out of committee, but we were watching that to see if that would impact the city. We're also watching the legal landscape because there have been some cities that have imposed various regulations, and there have been some lawsuits that have occurred because of that. So we're watching what's going on legally, and hopefully as these lawsuits, especially with COVID, a lot of them slowed down, but as we move forward, we'll get kind of a better idea of what we're able to do as a city, and what cities are able to do in dealing with some of these short-term rentals. Just some of the data that we have. So in 2021, we talked about calls for service. Those are going to be people that call into the police department because there's a problem. So we had 83 calls for service in 2021. The calls for service that we had involved 39 properties, and 10 properties were basically 60% of those calls for service. Now, if you look relative to the prior year in 2020, where we had 115 calls for service in 2020 involving 44 properties, and 9 properties were a little over half of the calls for service we saw. So in the 2 years that we've been monitoring this data, we've seen about a 27% reduction in the calls for service from 2020 to 2021. Looking at the trend over the past 4 years, like I said, in 2018, we didn't see a whole lot of stuff going on. The fall of 2018, that's kind of where we saw an uptick. And if you look at the 2019, 2020, we had kind of the most number of calls for service. And then last year in 2021, we've seen a reduction in that sort of thing. But you see that trend line over the past 4 years. As far as specific properties that we have 10 properties that have had at least 3 calls for service. And the way we look at this, the first 2 properties on that, the one that has 10 complaints that we dealt with last year and the one that has 7 complaints, both of those have been put into basically our POP program, which is problem-oriented policing. So we got NPOs that are assigned to those properties, and they're trying to deal with those issues, work with the homeowners, work with the neighbors, work with the associations, trying to figure out how we can live with each other. So they're currently working on those properties. Just kind of an overview of the types of complaints we get from short-term rentals. Most of the complaints we get are either going to be kind of that noise, party, alcohol, drug type call, some civil problems. That's kind of a catch-all for some of the problems that we see. Maybe a dispute between the person who's renting a short-term rental and the owner. That's kind of a problem sometimes, or some additional problems. And then parking. Those are, if you look at those 3 categories, that makes up 82% of the calls that we have. And just to kind of give you some something else to look at here, if we look, we had over 3,000 noise complaints reported in 2021, and so less than 0.9% of those occurred at a location that we were able to identify as a short-term rental. So some of the follow-up that we do, like I said, we have currently we have 4 open POP projects. So these are the projects that our neighborhood police officers are actually working with the property owners and the neighbors to try and solve disputes. Two of those are the ones that I showed you. We had the most number of complaints. Currently working on those. Two of those basically have been resolved. One of them, which is a property that we got with Airbnb. They delisted them for 30 days. That property owner has since changed his business model. So instead of doing short-term rentals, he does more of, I'm going to say, intermediate type rentals. So this would be kind of that corporate apartment, maybe traveling nurses would be an example. So it's going to be over a 30-day period. So we're not seeing that property. Last problem we had on that property was in April of 2021. And then the second one, second POP project, just recently the owner sold that property to a neighbor. And so it's going from a short-term rental purchased by a neighbor, and they're going to make it into a long-term rental and live just either next door or down the street or something like that. So we've solved two of the four problems that we've had in that situation. And like I said, our POP officers will continue to work with those folks to solve these problems. In addition to what we're doing here, the industry continues to change, to evolve, to deal with some of the problems and some of the publicity that they've received. So last year, Airbnb and Vrbo have come up with an agreement. They've got a third-party company that's supposed to develop what they call a community integrity program. So if you have these problem properties, they're going to work together across platforms in an effort to make sure that if you've got one problem property, it's just not going to go to one of the other platforms and continue to be a problem. So they're going to try and communicate that way in an effort to try and eliminate some of these issues. And with that, I'll take any questions on short-term rentals.
Thank you very much. Mayor Pro Tem.
So sometimes we on council hear from, neighbors who have frustration about a short-term rental in their area. What is the best place for us to direct them if they want to have a short-term rental looked at?
So what we do is when we get those questions, and we spend a lot of time talking to people. I field a lot of calls on short-term rentals. But we tell them, hey, listen, if you've got a problem, immediately call the police. And what that does is that generates a call for service. And the officers, whether it's a noise complaint, whether it's trash issues, whatever parking issues, we can generally work with whomever is there at the time to resolve the complaint immediately, and then also turn around and work with the property owner. So one of these properties that we're working with, for example, one of the things that they have done is they've installed decibel meters inside the home. So if the decibel level gets above 80, then the management company is notified. So they're using technology in a way to try and resolve some of these issues or prevent some of these issues. So number one, call the police. We can deal with that if they continue and if there's other problems. So if there's trash issue, property standards, neighborhood services, they also can get involved. So in some of these properties that we're dealing with, it's usually kind of a joint effort in dealing with all of the problems that we have. But the first thing is contact the police department, and we'll see if we can't resolve that problem immediately.
Councilman Riccadelli.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for that excellent presentation, Curtis. I was wondering, as you deal with those problem properties that you mentioned, are there any tools that would be useful that the council could provide that are not yet in place, or do you feel like you have all of the tools that you need for those neighborhood police officers to deal with the problem properties?
So just kind of looking at the track record now, and like I said, we've worked on making sure that we collect data better in a way to identify those properties. We've got NPOs that are dealing with those properties. So we've seen about a 27% reduction in the calls for service. We seem to be eliminating some of the issues that we have. So, and a lot of the things that we have, whether it's our noise ordinance, or the way the trash ordinance, that littering, normal criminal penalties that we have, those seem to be the tools that we can most effectively utilize in dealing with these problems. So I think right now it seems to be working, and with that, I don't have any other recommendations at this point.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for the progress that you're making on this, and that the whole department is making on this. So thank you.
Sure.
So, Curtis, it would appear that you guys are doing a really good job in collecting data with regard to some of the major, I guess, companies who are doing short-term rentals. So, what about the private, individual type homeowners with their short-term rentals? So, is there anything that's collecting or tracking that type of data?
It's hard. One of our blind spots right now is I can't necessarily tell you how many short-term rental properties there are in the city of Plano. Part of that is because they have companies out there that supposedly can do that. We haven't contracted with them at this point, just because of the expense, and I'm not sure that there's necessarily a need, because I can tell you we have 39 identified properties that we responded to calls at this past year. So, but looking, there is a company out there called AirDNA, and it kind of gives you an idea of how many short-term rentals are on the major platforms. So Airbnb and Vrbo. And so just looking today, it showed about 560. Now, what the limitations are is their map includes Murphy. Their map also includes a little part of Richardson, where there seems to be a high concentration of these properties. So, I'm going to guess it's probably not that high, but somewhere between, just the way I've seen, 450 to 550 properties here. Now, some of those are going to be whole house properties. Others are going to be rooms that somebody may be renting and it may be on Facebook or some other online platform. And we're probably not going to be able to effectively see those. However we do it, unless we get a call for service.
Yeah.
And then we would get information based upon responding to that, where our officers would check and let us know.
Well, you and I both came from the criminal world, so the reason why I'm asking is because I also want to know whether or not there is any, well, not criminal.
I was just going to say, it's getting warm up here
the
now.
The criminal law area, oh my God.
Back in the day when we were
Back
running in the streets,
days.
right? Yes.
But I think apparently there's some correlation of short-term rental that people are putting on short-term rental and potential increases in criminal offenses. So I think that's the reason why I was asking about whether or not there's any additional data collection with regard to short-term rental in the private realm. I mean, obviously Airbnb and the larger companies, they're going to comply and they're going to be up and up because they have a reputation to hold up. But with regard to the private arena, I think that's the area. I think some of the concerns, and I think a lot of our constituents are emailing. They're not talking about the big companies. They're talking about the private rentals. So, is there any plans in possibly exploring, partnership or possibly, contracting using some of their data or borrowing some of their data?
From some of these companies, I mean, we could certainly, looking at it and what they're looking at, like the company that I referenced earlier, one of the things they want is they want cities or entities to hire them and do tax collection in addition to getting that data. And there's certainly a cost associated with that. So with regards to the dealing with criminal behavior or criminal activity surrounding these short-term rentals, I think probably right now, if we get a call that there is a crime going on, regardless of whether it's a short-term rental, whether it's a long-term rental, whether it's somebody's home, we're going to respond and deal with it accordingly. If we identify it as a short-term rental, then once it's in our database, we then check those out and see if we're starting to see a trend at one place or another. So we are managing that and monitoring that, and we'll target that if we need to, if it becomes a problem. So I don't know if that answered your question.
It sort of does. And just to clarify, with regard to the criminal world, you and I both were in the Collin County District Attorney's Office as prosecutors, and Ashley, you were much more senior than I am at that time.
Way back when.
Yes. Way back when.
Yes.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you, Mr. Howard. I appreciate
All
it.
right. Thank you very much.
Our next item is item 6, consent and regular agendas. Is there any item a councilman would like to remove? All right. Item 7, council items for discussion or future agendas. Okay. Well, amazingly enough, we are going to take a recess and return in 3 minutes. I now declare the Plano City Council is convened in open session, that all members are present. Councilman Shelby Williams will be on Zoom. We'll begin tonight's regular meeting with the invocation led by Iman Azar Sebadar, an Islamic Association of Collin County, and the Pledge of Allegiance and Texas Pledge led by Councilman Rick Grady. Unfortunately, the Legacy of Harmony could not be here tonight with this evening, but we expect to see them soon later on. Would you all please stand?
In the name of the most gracious and merciful God, we pray. Dear Lord of the universe, we thank you for this time and opportunity to pursue peace and stability for this city and society. O merciful one, those who are ailing, heal them. Those who are worried, comfort them. Those who are suffering through the waves of this pandemic, strengthen them. As our elected officials deliberate this city's policies and discuss the needs of its beautiful people, allow them to do so without divisiveness and discord. Empower them to pursue goodness in all things for all people at all times in a selfless manner. O controller of all affairs and guides of all hearts, by your grace you select, and through your name you guide. The members of this city council recognize the importance of this city and have pledged to uphold its good for all its people. Allow them then, O Lord, through your assistance, to fulfill their duty to the best of their ability. From distant lands with an array of cultures, it is not the color of our skins nor the languages we speak, not even the way we live or the faith and belief we ascribe to, rather a common ground which unites us all and makes us one here and now in this nation of ours is the pledge to our flag and the promise to uphold our Constitution. So, my Lord, guide us, inspire us, use us as your tools of mercy and righteousness for this nation and for humanity, love and unity, peace and stability for all. Amen.
And if everyone would place the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you. Be seated. Well, wait. Now she got quiet. I have the esteemed opportunity to give the oath of office and the introduction of our new chief, Chris Biggerstaff, as the new City of Plano Fire Chief. I'd like to call forward Chief Biggerstaff, his wife Marcy, and your family and friends, whoever want to come forward. Oh, she's coming back. All right. All right. Well, it's my honor to administer the oath of office. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will faithfully execute the duties of the Fire Chief of the City of Plano, State of Texas, and will to the best of your ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States and of this state and the Charter and ordinances of this city? And you furthermore solemnly swear that you have not directly or indirectly paid, offered, or promised to pay, contributed, nor promised to contribute any money or valuable thing, or promised any public office or employment as a reward to secure your appointment, so help you God. I do. Congratulations. Let's take a picture. You guys want to come back up? Come on, yes you do. We want you to. Thank you. Congratulations. We also have some oaths of office given tonight to citizens who will be serving on the city boards and committees. I ask that members in attendance come up when I call your name. In the Community Relations Commission, Amit Warkad. And Library Advisory Board, Michael Tan. All right. Thanks, guys. Yeah, just stand up here, and I'll just read you the oath of office. All right. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will faithfully execute the duties of the boards and commissions of the City of Plano, State of Texas, and will, to the best of your ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States and of this state, and the Charter and ordinances of the city? And you furthermore solemnly swear to affirm that you have not directly or indirectly paid, offered, or promised to pay, contributed, nor promised to contribute any money or valuable thing, or promised any public office or employment as a reward to secure your appointment, so help you God.
I do.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. You want a picture? Yeah.
Both together?
Yeah, come on. We'll do it. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Comments of public interest. This portion of the meeting is to allow up to 3 minutes per speaker with 30 total minutes on items of interest or concern and not on items that are on the current agenda. The council may not discuss these items, but may respond with factual or policy information. The council may choose to place the item on a future agenda. And I do have 2 speakers this evening. The first one is Sharon Overall.
Sharon Overall, Plano, Texas. I want you to think about a product that is coming to market. Preliminary data shows that about 15% of U.S. citizens will use the product. The product will kill over 480,000 users and 40,000 innocents a year just by being exposed to it. Most will not die right away, but will die from the use over 20 to 30 years. There are some innocent victims who die immediately from a heart attack triggered by the product, or a stroke, or SIDS, or an asthma attack, but the death certificate rarely shows what triggered the death. The product smells horribly. Even those who use it tend to stick it out of the window of their car. It leaves behind a toxic residue. For many exposed to it, the product will cause a sore throat or bronchial infection. It drifts for over 100 feet, so outside use cannot be contained. It causes a major litter problem. It is projected that this product will comprise 25 to 50% of all collected litter items from roadways and streets. Those who die from it directly or indirectly, such as spouses or children or co-workers, often die a very slow, painful death. The most painful death is those who die from emphysema. They start out with shortness of breath. They gradually produce more and more fluid or mucus in their lungs and airways. At the end, they are unable to cough up this mucus and they drown. The product includes 7,000 chemicals. A few are lead, formaldehyde, cadmium, arsenic, and benzene. So why allow this product? Well, the benefits that some that say that it calms their nerves. Some say it's cool. But the real reason is that it is a very lucrative product for those who produce and sell it. Now, if this product just killed the user, then it would be fine to not regulate it. But that is not the case. It is a nuisance at the least for those who are bothered by its stench and the trigger of allergies and sore throats and bronchial infections. At the other end, it kills innocent victims by causing heart attacks, asthma attacks, cancer, and emphysema. Ask yourself, if this product came to market today, would you allow it to be used on public streets and sidewalks or in parks? Would you allow a person to basically create an environment that means his neighbors are unable to use their own backyards? I would say that any true protector of the common good would never allow it. So now is the time to correct the wrongs of the past. Are you a leader with integrity who will stand up for the innocent and serve and protect? Or are you on the side of the killer? Thank you.
The next speaker is Shannon Hawkins.
Good evening to all that is present. In an effort to bring a resolution to an ongoing problem on the east side of Plano in which my family and I reside, we have made numerous trips to the Plano Police Department, over 5 times. We have followed the chain of commands, including bringing awareness to the city council members by expressing the privacy and harassing issues from not only the community, aircraft carriers, and city workers. Many of them have stars on their homes. We have received no feedback or assistance. I recently contacted the Deputy Director of the FAA, and I agree that the police department should be made aware in helping with this matter. However, that has not happened. The pilot has been attempting to assist our local police and fire and rescue with their siren issues, as well as public works. In doing so, neighbors are constantly using an unknown device that can locate our whereabouts in the home, as well as all cell phones, which strikes are administered to many parts of the body. We are often knocked off centered, and we have pain in areas that are being struck. We find this very terroristic and dangerous. A nearby neighbor is able to make certain noises that beckons the assistance of the pilot, whom shows up immediately hovering above and around home. At that time, vehicles in the neighborhood proceeds to our locations and strikes begin. We noticed the timer put in place for our heating and AC unit we paid over $1,000 to have fixed less than a year ago. It is now back to making noises from the motor caused by constant hits to the unit. January 8th, 2022, I cut the unit off at 7:22 p.m. Immediately, the neighbor gave commands for community assistance. They were unsuccessful, which caused a community member to shoot 5 shots into the air. The aircraft appeared at 7:24 p.m. and was unsuccessful as well. At 8 p.m., the Siren Test began, and both police and fire department were unsuccessful. I had to put my phone on airplane mode. I cut off the background apps, and I took the SIMS card out of my phone. The sirens immediately went down. I am asking the committee to assist in helping the city police and fire department to become fully functional without the use of personal cell phone or home appliances due to privacy and financial strain imposed upon the family. It's difficult to have a FaceTime doctor visit with the presence of aircraft or community listening in on calls with such sensitive information. It's spying, hacking, harassing, humiliating, and causing bodily harm. I have videos, photos, license plate numbers, and addresses. I look forward to hearing from you via email or cell phone numbers sent to you earlier this evening. Thank you for your time. And my question would be, what would any of you suggest that we do moving forward? Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the consent agenda.
The consent agenda. The consent agenda will be acted upon in one motion and contains items which are routine and typically non-controversial. Items may be removed from this agenda for individual discussion by a council member, the city manager, or any citizen. The presiding officer will establish time limits based upon the number of speaker requests.
Motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor, please vote. Shelby?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 8-0. Next item.
Items for individual consideration. Public hearing items. Applicants are limited to 15 minutes presentation time with a 5-minute rebuttal if needed. Remaining speakers are limited to 30 total minutes of testimony time with 3 minutes assigned per speaker. The presiding officer may amend these times as deemed necessary. Non-public hearing items. The presiding officer will permit public comment for items on the agenda not posted for a public hearing. The presiding officer will establish time limits based upon the number of speaker requests, the length of the agenda, and to ensure meeting efficiency, and may include a cumulative time limit. Speakers will be called in the order the requests are received until the cumulative time is exhausted. Item number 1. Public hearing and consideration of an ordinance as requested in zoning case 2021-15 to amend the comprehensive zoning ordinance of the city, ordinance number 2015-5-2 as heretofore amended, so as to rezone 2.9 acres of land located at the northeast corner of 15th Street and M Avenue in the city of Plano, Collin County, Texas, from urban residential to planned development 53 urban residential, directing a change accordingly in the official zoning map of the city, and providing a penalty clause, a repealer clause, a savings clause, a severability clause, a publication clause, and an ineffective date.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, executives, and members of the public. Item number 1 is zoning case 2021-15. It was submitted under the interim comprehensive plan, so that is the plan I'll be discussing with you this evening. I am Christina Day, Director of Planning. So this is a public hearing and consideration of an ordinance for this zoning case. The property before you this evening is a compact single-family development that is proposed on an infill property. The majority of the block is surrounded by residential streets, namely East 15th Street, 15th Place, N Avenue, and M Avenue, as demonstrated on the map on the screen. The base zoning is urban residential and will remain with the requested plan development district. The property is surrounded by zoning supporting residential uses on all sides, with the single exception of general office zoning that is to the west, and the existing commercial uses also in that same location on the corner to the west. The future reuse of the chapel on the former First Baptist Church property to the south is also another adjacent potential commercial use, but generally the area does contain residential uses. The next slide shows an aerial of the property surrounded in yellow. So the property was previously used and owned by the First Baptist Church. It was primarily a parking lot, but also contained a public garden, plots used for basically vegetable gardening, as well as some additional open space. So this is the proposed associated concept plan that has been submitted by the applicant. You can see on the plan there are 26 detached residential units. There are 2 internal streets that provide access to these units, and they're also through using driveways and garages. On the majority of lots are provided access through these streets, although a few do gain access directly off of public streets that exist in the area. 19 homes front the existing public streets, and 7 homes take their primary access off the internal streets. So this design is due to the shape of the existing parcel and the housing that exists as part of the block today. So conformance to the comprehensive plan is based on, let me fast forward here a little bit, the residential designation, and that is shown in yellow on the graphic before you. So this is consistent with the request before you. It's also consistent with the 2012 interim amendment policies. There are a couple of other policies that were cited in the staff report, including the Downtown Vision and Strategy Update and Housing Trends and Strategic Report. Both of these indicate that the city's interested in housing in strategic locations, and this one is supported directly by the comprehensive plan's land use policies. So through the plan review process, we wanted to note that a number of changes have occurred. The applicant's been working with us and went through a number of tablings at the Planning and Zoning Commission in order to go through some design changes to ensure that the best product moved forward to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And so you'll see this was the original design, and they actually reduced lots, reduced density. There's larger lots with more open area, reductions in building height, reduced right-of-way, and ultimately reducing the city's long-term maintenance cost. So the intent was to provide the best workable product for the long term for the community. Plan development stipulations. This slide compares the existing urban residential district standards with the proposed plan development district. And the idea here is really to provide a transition with the plan development district, not making something that exactly mimics the standards within the neighborhood to the north and to the east, but something that is a transition from the downtown business government district, which is much more intense, to the south and to the west, but something that is a little bit of a mix moving to the north. So we hope that this provides an adequate transition with 3,000 square foot lots and a lot depth of 70 feet, but still meeting the same coverage requirements and driveways and other a similar look and feel as you might find within the neighborhood, which does have a mix of housing types. So this plan development request does, we believe, meet the standards of the zoning ordinance, which does have some requirements. There is a 5-acre minimum requirement, and this property is only 2.9 acres. But it would be very difficult for it to meet the 5-acre minimum, because even if you added the additional 3 lots that are excluded within the whole block, it would not bump up to the 5-acre minimum. So we believe that because the entire block would not meet the 5-acre minimum, it's reasonable for this to be an exception. But City Council must find that the establishment of the district is required to implement the comprehensive plan and related studies. So that is included in the ordinance for your consideration. It was recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Also, plan development requests are required to meet these 5 standards as required by the zoning ordinance. such as protecting and providing for public health and safety. They really need to meet some substantive, purposeful reasons for their creation. Otherwise, we should be using our standard zoning districts. So we went through in the staff report and talked about why this is innovative. It's mitigating development impacts. There are specific standards that meet each of these. And so it's therefore, again, recommended that this plan development request move forward. So regarding feedback, there were 2 letters of opposition within 200 feet. In the information that was sent to council earlier today, we did have some feedback from an owner of actually 3 properties within 200 feet. However, on the letter, they used another property address within the city, so we weren't able to technically include those, but I did want to point that out, that there was some other support from the homeowner, even though it didn't meet the technical requirements. Overall, we received 3 letters of support, 7 in opposition. As far as unduplicated responses, there were 11 total responses. And at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, there were no speakers in opposition. So this is how things mapped out citywide. You see there were a couple of responses from further out in the city, but the majority were close to the area of the change. And as you zoom in closer, you can see that is the way the responses looked. The Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend this change by a vote of 7-0. The applicant is here and does have a presentation, and Eric and I are available for questions should you have them.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
In the report, it talks about the fencing and the PD language about homes and property lines, locations that are more than 6 feet. How is that going to impact the northern property line with the adjacent homes that are already there?
I want to look at that specific language. We do not anticipate, because those property lines have established fences. To my knowledge, I'm trying to make sure I'm correct about that. That should not impact them, because they shouldn't be impacted. They should be more than 6 feet setback, but we can look at that. They're not actually included in the planned development district, so if they were to want to fence their property, they should not be regulated by that. It would only be fence requests within the district.
Okay, but I guess I'm more concerned about the separation between the two properties.
Right, so I think it depends on who's requesting the fence permit. But generally, there's going to be more than a 6-foot setback between their building and the buildings adjacent, because there's going to be a 10-foot standard between the buildings that are being built by the proposed by the developer. The only thing that can be within 5 feet is a garage. So it generally shouldn't be an issue. And the developer may know more about the exact dimensions of the adjacent properties, but they shouldn't be within a foot. And so therefore I don't think practically it will be an issue.
Councilman Gray.
Just a couple of quick questions. It alluded to in the documentation that you've been working with a developer on this for a considerable amount of time, and there has been considerable amount of changes that have gone on. Do you have any idea as to, the length of time that you have spent, months, weeks, years, and also the amount of iterations that the developer has gone to get to this point of approval?
I believe Mr. Hill is looking that up right now.
So as far as the number of iterations, I believe we had approximately 6 variations to the plan. We had 1 or 2 significant changes in the beginning. We looked at some designs to reorient the lots. amend the street locations, and there was one or two very significant changes that we looked at with the applicant. Generally, the plan that you've seen tonight, there's been a form of that plan that we've seen several times after that date, and it's just been updated somewhat, just refining that plan. So just been some refinements of that. I believe they submitted the initial plan this summer. The date for the first plan is June 2021, so approximately.
Okay, so it's been a significant amount of time and significant iterations and changes that have been made and compromises that have been made.
Correct.
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll open the public hearing. Would the applicant like to address the council?
Audra Buckley, Dallas, Texas, representing the property owner. I've been in front of you, some of you before, because we own the property to the south and we own the property across N Avenue. So this is not our first rodeo with some of you. Christina kind of took a little bit of my thunder on the technicalities, so I'm going to get down into the community involvement. We had a lot of neighborhood input on this. We had 3 community meetings, which was for those that had originally been a part of the conversations with the property to the south. So we started with them, and then we added to the list as word got out, that we were having these meetings. And so we had them in June, August, and November. We also had email updates to the full group twice, but that didn't mean we didn't have a lot of back and forth with this one and that one and a lot of individuals. So this is just for the entirety of the groups that you see here. So they wanted to know, what is this going to look like? So they had heard in the past about rice field and the idea that we might want to do a rice field concept here. That did not fly very well. They did not want the rice field concept here. So we quickly ditched that one. And then we came to this one and tried it again, and they said, well, what we'd really like to see are porches on all the units. And we don't want to have rooftop decks on any of these units that are not fronting on 15th and N Avenue. So we reduced that just to 15th and N Avenue, and we finally came up with this design. And you'll notice that all the homes that are going to be fronting on public streets are going to have these porches that were requested, and that was part of the reason for the 10-foot setback versus the 5, was to allow for those porches. And you'll see here that we incorporated in our design to them the plans that the City of Plano has for 15th Street. One of the things that the neighborhood wanted me to pass along to the powers that be whenever I got up here was to let you know they love the bump outs at the corners of M and N, but they would like to see another one in the center to break up that parallel parking and put a tree there. So I have done my job. So if you have any questions for me, I'm ready.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Councilman Riccadelli.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for that presentation, and good to see you again. I was curious, it sounds like there's been a lot of neighborhood outreach and feedback, which is wonderful. Thank you for doing that. We didn't see a whole lot of responses in favor of the request. Do you know, were there people you spoke with who were in favor of it who just didn't respond to the city? Or
yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Gotcha. Do you have an estimate for that?
I'd say there was probably at least a dozen that were in support, verbally talking to us.
Gotcha.
They like the changes that we made, especially with this particular design that we came up with.
Well, fantastic. Well, thank you for that information. I appreciate the context. And thank you for working with them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have any speakers cards for this item?
The only other speaker I have is Phyllis Gerald.
I'm here to answer any questions as well.
Thank you, Ms. Gerald. All right, seeing none, I'll close the item, confine the comments to the council.
I do have one comment that I just want to make, and I do like the design. This, to me, blends very well into what I would call old school, with the porches and the deck on the porches, and really kind of fits into a early 1900s, late 1800s kind of feel for the product, and I think it would enhance the entire area with the concept that they have here, including another bump out for another tree. I think that's really a wise thing to do. So I am in favor of this. I find that it matches what we're trying to do with the comprehensive plan, and certainly the study that has been done on housing. And I would make a motion to approve this.
Second.
All right. I have a motion and a second. Any other comments before we vote? Okay. Please vote. Shelby, how do you vote?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So I have a motion of 8-0. Thank you.
Item number 2, public hearing and consideration of an ordinance as requested in zoning case 2021-26 to amend Article 16, parking and loading and related sections of the comprehensive zoning ordinance of the city, ordinance number 2015-5-2, as heretofore amended, pertaining to special vehicle parking, providing a penalty clause, a repealer clause, a savings clause, a severability clause, a publication clause, and an effective date.
Right. This case is a text amendment that is in Article 16 and is related exclusively to special vehicle parking. We were approached by neighborhood services, and I think in cooperation with the municipal prosecutor with this beneficial change to code enforcement a few months ago. And so we brought forth this change. And it is really for one purpose. It is to create consistent direction regarding special vehicle parking between two ordinances, the zoning ordinance and the remaining code of ordinances. So the potential here is that someone could read the zoning ordinance and not understand that the code of ordinances had slightly different language. So we wanted to clarify that. So the zoning ordinance has a definition for special vehicle, but it doesn't really address what zoning district, any kind of distinctions between zoning districts. So whether you're residential or commercial, everything's lumped together. The Code of Ordinances doesn't act that way. It really makes some special provisions for residential zoning. So in order to make sure that everyone's clear that if you're in a residential district, there might be some special rules over in the Code of Ordinances that you want to look at. We thought we would toss in a reference to Chapter 12 of the Code of Ordinances, and then also to cover other items that might come about. There's a more general reference. So you see this rather small change to the zoning ordinance under point 4 of Article 16, and it was recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously. It is also supported by the comprehensive plan, both the land use element and housing element. And so we're available for questions you might have regarding this amendment.
Any questions for staff? Thank you very much. I'll open the public hearing.
There are no speakers on this item.
No speakers? All right. I close the public hearing. Confine the comments of the council.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second to approve agenda item number 2. Please vote. How do you vote, Shelby?
Yes.
Okay.
Am I getting predictable?
Never.
Motion passes 8-0. Thank you. Item 3, next item.
Item number 3, consideration of a resolution to approve the extension of Chapter 380 Incentive Agreement contractual deadlines, authorizing its execution by the city manager and providing an effective date.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Sally Bain. I'm the Director of Economic Development. I'm here this evening on behalf of the Finance Department, who exerts the compliance and certifications for all of our active agreements. The resolution for your consideration this evening will authorize the city manager to extend a waiver for compliance of the active agreements through June 30th, 2022, so for approximately the next 5.5 months, the purpose of which is to modify the remaining agreements that have not been revised and restated to allow for the evolving nature of their workforce. And I'm happy to take any questions you may have about the waiver.
Any questions for Sally? All right.
It's resolutions for the motion.
We need a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve item 3. Please vote. How do you vote, Shelby?
Affirmative.
Thank you.
Motion passes 8-0. There being no